Hi, welcome to the Catalyst Podcast. I'm your host, Hunter Burney. A catalyst is defined as a person or thing that precipitates an event. A catalyst is something that it participates in a reaction but does not get consumed in the reaction. There's a heart behind this podcast for, people with aspirations. There's a heart behind this podcast for motivated people that want to make a difference, that have a bias for action, that really truly want to be a catalyst in the environment around them, both professionally and personally, in their homes, in their workplace, and beyond. So welcome to this podcast. I really hope you're enjoying the series that we're in. Welcome to this episode, and let's dive right in. Wheels up. Welcome back to the Catalyst Podcast. I'm excited to kind of continue the narrative around change management and as just kind of a broad category. But I have Rick Maurer on the show. And real quick, Rick, before I turn it over to you, wanted to give a good introduction. Rick is a speaker, author, consultant, and expert on helping others avoid resistance to change, which is common, right? Since the publication of Rick's book, Beyond the Wall of Resistance in the 90s, Rick's opinion has been sought by the Wall Street Journal, CNBC, NBC Nightly News, Fortune, and really many other media outlets. Some of the largest companies in the world have asked Rick for his advice on ways to avoid resistance to change and ways to build strong support for change and other big projects of the like. Rick, it's great to have you. With that, just wanted to kind of turn it over to you for a moment and, kind of let you continue the spiel around who Rick is.
Like I was born in a log cabin, that sort of thing. Well, yeah, this is not going to be a long story, but the fact that I focus on resistance and have such a narrow focus, a lot people might be interested. I was in graduate school to learn to work with emotionally disturbed kids in public schools. And it turns out this program was a radical program. I didn't realize it at the time. That suited me fine, but I didn't realize it. And they said, a lot of these kids aren't disturbed. It's the schools that are disturbed. And if you can change schools, you're going to have a lot of healthier kids. You're going to have less problems. And at the time, I bought that. I still do. And the idea was we would then go out and work in schools, working with kids, but basically trying to change the system, and so I thought, that's a great idea. And it suited my youth and my arrogance that, I can change a system that's been there forever. And realized, I couldn't. And you can imagine, so I go into my first teaching job and it's in elementary school. I had no experience other than student teaching. I walk in, there are teachers who had like 20, 30 years experience. And I'm saying stuff like, hi, I'm here to help. And they would say, well, that's really nice, young man. You sit right over there. And the moment we need help, we're going to call on you. And I mean, it was almost that kind of sarcastic response.
Right.
And I realized people weren't listening to me. So for a long while, I'm going, these are idiots. They don't get it. They're stuck in their ways, all of that. And then it started to occur to me, they were listening to other people. And how come it is I would be in a meeting and I'd say something, and then this Hunter guy comes in and he says the same thing, and people go, that's great. And so I had to start looking at myself. And out of that, I got interested in the field called organization development, which is the human part of what goes on in organizations. And still stuck with how do you influence people, and kept going back to school. And then a lot of my clients were really starting to lead big changes, and they kept saying, we keep getting resistance. I mean, the very thing I was getting as a beginning teacher. And I was able to talk with them and help them. But the language, there are two things. One is the language of resistance comes from psychology, and it's just filled with psychobabble. I mean, it's good if you're talking to other psychologists. It's not good if you're talking to engineers, and I wanted to have a way of talking about resistance and support in a way that would not be dumbed down, but be in the language that men and women working for a living like making stuff and getting stuff done could go, yeah, that's what I need.
Hmm.
And so I ended up coming up with my own model of why people resist and why they support, and I'm sure we'll get into that.
Hmm.
And I'd written other books in the early 90s, and people would go, yeah, that's very nice, but nothing ever happened. I wrote this book, and people started calling me because I was saying something different about resistance. First of all, I was saying, if you're trying to overcome resistance, you're actually making a problem for yourself
Hmm.
because people do not like people who try to overcome their resistance. And I realize it's a common word to use, but when our strategy is, all right, how am I going to get Hunter to do this? Immediately, your defenses go up, or at
Hmm.
least they ought to.
Hmm.
Uh, and so I thought there's got to be a better way, and I kept studying, and I won't get into all the stuff I studied, but I ended up out of all of that coming up with this model of 3 levels of resistance, and that really has been the foundation for virtually everything I've done for the last 25 years. I mean, even this year I wrote a book, and the foundation is those 3 levels. I'm working on a new assessment tool. The foundation is those 3 levels. So
Hmm.
it's served me well and continues to serve me. And also, somebody reminded me this morning that it's not just me that's got served. I was thinking, I know people, let's say, around North America
Hmm.
who use my stuff, the UK, Europe, Russia, China, India, and a lot of other places. So, it's just because people call me and say, hey, I've been using your stuff for 20 years. And these are people I've never heard of before.
Wow.
So, so I get excited about it. So I will,
Yeah, that's awesome.
maybe I'll take a breath at this point.
No, I appreciate that. I love to understand the context around. We will certainly get to the present day. I'm curious though, when you talk about, I guess, kind of beginning your career as a teacher and picking up on these things, it sounds like you were kind of headed down a career path, but then this quickly became an interest and passion, and something you dialed into that kind of directed you from there. Is that a fair assessment, or?
It's, it looks like I had a career path, but it was more like me wandering around going, oh, that looks interesting.
Okay.
There was an old comedian named Harpo Marx. There was a group called the Marx Brothers.
Mhm.
And in his autobiography, and I think he's very funny. I loved his work. In his autobiography, he said, I don't know if I was a success or failure in my life. And frankly, it doesn't make a difference to me because it allowed me to explore a lot of things that interested me.
Mm.
And so I found that throughout my so-called career, which started in 1978 after I quit teaching, uh, I decided, I think maybe I could write plays. So I started writing plays. I had 3 plays produced, uh, and then thought, okay, uh, I need to get back to this work that I've been trained for. I want to do that.
Mm.
I used to be a musician. I was a professional musician. After a long time, I thought I got to pick it up again. So my horn is sitting right over here, out of screenshot, and
Nice.
I was practicing actually just before we started. So my path is not so much a path is like I follow stuff that kind of interests me.
Okay.
Not even kind of, but really interests me. And
Yeah.
and it can, when you look backwards, it looks like it was actually a path that I was on, but it's not quite that neat. So
Yeah. No, I love that. I mean, I personally can't look back and say, oh, I was on a very well defined linear path. So I have an appreciation and heart for what you're describing as, the things that motivated you and energized you, and were your passions led, your efforts and energy. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. Obviously, you've gotten to this point with your platform and multiple
yeah,
books. And I think that's a really strong takeaway.
good. Yeah. By the way, the cool thing for me about that and is that I'm getting to work with stuff that I've developed and that by working with people continue to develop rather than what when I first started out, I would be using other people's models and theories and I could get good at those. And I really appreciate a lot of that work. But somehow working with your own stuff and seeing it work or seeing it not work and getting surprised is a very different experience for me. And that's one of the things that keeps me energized.
So
So
No, I appreciate you sharing that. What I'm just curious, how long would you say the time frame of like, okay, this whole like change management, resistance, all this is interesting to me. I see it in real life. I'm going to go study some models and some things around this and begin to develop my own take on it. What, just curious, is that like a 5-year evolution, a 15-year evolution? I mean, from
Hmm.
right going from, hey, this is what I'm taking in. Now here's Rick's. Um,
It's a great question. I really need to think about it because I've never thought of it that way.
yeah, I mean,
One thing.
not to suggest that it's something that's discrete, right? I mean, I think it sounds
Hmm.
like it may has evolved over time for you. I imagine there's a kind of a turning point in there at some point.
Well, the big turning point for me is I had taken, um, I'd gone to school to be after I was teaching for a while to studied organization development. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the kind of consultant I wanted to be. And I
Mm-hmm.
was getting a lot of work doing management development work. Hey, could you come in and do a workshop on this and this and this? And I was talking to Peter Block, who's one of the leaders in my field, and I said, I think I do. People say I do a really nice job with management development stuff and blah, 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 but I don't get any big projects doing organization development work. And so he said, well, how are you spending your time? And basically, my calendar was filled with all these things. He said, well, no wonder. He said, there's no time. He said, what you got to do is give up some of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so the thing, thing that really was a catalyst was not piling on something new, but giving up.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, I didn't give up all my paid work, but I did start saying no more often. And what I found is I started getting more calls about kind of organizational change and all of that. Is the word resistance just started coming up a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I had been interested in kind of Eastern thinking, especially like the martial art of Aikido and Tai Chi, and their whole approach to conflict, to resistance, if you will, is you don't invite the conflict, and you just follow the energy that's there right in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
And I found it novel, and I found it exciting. So
Mm-hmm.
that got me started. And then I had decided I had taken one of these breaks where I was writing scripts and working on plays, and I thought I'm getting rusty, and so I wanted a place to go study. And what I was looking for is I love baseball, and every spring, uh, baseball players go to spring training and they practice stuff they've been doing since they were 6 years old. They
Mm-hmm.
go back to the basics. And so I started talking to friends and saying, I don't want a doctorate. I'm not really interested in a new theory and all of that. I'm interested in spring training where somebody could say, Rick, you need to, you need to square off when you're bunting. You
Mm-hmm.
need to do that sort of thing. And a lot of people said, or not a lot, but a few friends said, consider the Gestalt Institute of Cleveland. It's a school of psychology that has a big unit that just focuses on organizational work. And so I thought, okay, that's a good place to go get spring training. And well, it turns out it was, but it was also a great place to get a new theory. And it was consistent with that stuff I had been studying in martial arts.
Mm-hmm.
And it really fit the experience I was having as I was working in healthcare systems and some chemical plants and that going, this fits there.
Mm-hmm.
And so this was all happening maybe if like in a 5 year period.
Okay.
And where, yeah. So sorry
Yeah.
for that long winded answer. But
No, no, no. I think that's important. At least the way I see it and hear you describe, I think that's great context, right? Because the other flip side of this is, you know, I'm a listener or I hear your story, I read your book, and or something like that. I just get some kind of introduction or perhaps surface level understanding of yourself or anybody that we may be discussing, but to think that there's just some kind of magical period or overnight, right?
yeah.
I think it's important to kind of peel back those layers and understand like there's a transition. There's a period of transition. There's a, anyway, that can be a whole nother podcast, but I appreciate you kind of indulging and sharing that.
Sure.
Thank you for being a part of this journey. Definitely subscribe, like, check out Be a Catalyst on Instagram and on Twitter. Also, don't forget to check out the YouTube channel where you'll find videos in addition to the Catalyst podcast recordings that give a little bit more context around my heart for training, my heart for seeing early to middle managers and first-time leaders really thrive and be a catalyst in the organization that they're in the project that they are after, everything that goes along with that. So thank you for being a part of this. Tune in for the next episode, and remember, be you, be confident, be a catalyst.